I'm Andrew Tabak. I was here as an ROTC cadet from Worcester Polytechnic Institute in 1974 to 1978. We used to come in and stay in the World War II wood barracks up by the water tower and spend all our time down on South Post. So I got to go down there. We first used in 74 M14 rifles to qualify in the range there at various training activities. We switched to M16s in the second year, and I think in my senior year, one of the things we did as the ROTC unit did some, got the 10th Special Forces in and did a little bit of ground parachute training for the cadets, just used the ground simulators. I had already gone to airborne school in 1977 as a ROTC junior, so I was the S4 for the ROTC unit, so I just kind of watched those things. In 1978 to 1982, I was on active duty. I had joined ROTC with the intention of I liked the machinery of tanks and wanted to get into armor, and I wanted to get the Army to pay to have me live in Europe, so they stuck me in air defense and sent me to Fort Riley, Kansas, and kind of my relationship with the Army went downhill, whatever. But I got off active duty after 4 years. And then a friend of mine said, "Oh, you get all these points, you should, get in the reserves and get a pension out of it and all that." So he found a slot for me as the S2 Air and the 187th Infantry Brigade separate. We were down in Barnum Road and what was later known as the Neshoba Publishing Building, across from the National Guard area. And so, as I said, I was S2 Air, which was just a staff officer in the Intel section. With them, I went on a summer camp to Fort Drum, New York, and a second summer camp up to Gagetown, New Brunswick, Canada. There's a joint base up there that we went to, plus plenty of weekends. And as a staff officer, I was also obligated to basically come out here every Thursday night for training sessions and planning sessions for the next drills. For one occasion with that job, I also got a tour in Iceland for 2 years. That was our deployment site. So I got to go up there as for a logistics or some sort of a staff exercise up there with higher ups, and got to visit that area. I then was looking for another slot. I went down, I ended up as the S2 Air, the intel officer for 3rd the 18th Infantry in Lawrence, which was a subordinate unit. So I was there for a year. We went to Fort Drum, New York for that unit, and I also got to go to another tour up to Iceland. And that occasion, I was the only one out of the battalion that went. There were a bunch of people from other battalions, and my job was to go around and document where our deployment site was. So I took a camera and photographed the perimeter of Reykjavik, Iceland, and up and down through the streets, and gathered intelligence for that mission and brought all that back. I got fed up with the reserves at that point, basically quit, but then I had another friend. I was working at RCA for my regular job at the time, and he belonged to this, or ran this little Corps of Engineer unit. He had a 12-man unit that did maintenance wrote repair contracts and did inspections on Army Reserve Centers. So he snagged me and invited me to come down, even though at the time I was wearing armor brass. I ended up in this Corps of Engineer unit. We had 12 guys, all on a first name basis. We had a World War II barracks building as our private office. We set it up with drafting tables upstairs. And we would go out to reserve centers all around New England and do inspections and then write up repair contracts. So I got into the contracting business that way. I learned all the costs and how to look up the dollar amounts for everything. Loads of fun. During that time, I was up at a reserve center in Dexter, Maine on a trip by myself, looking around the place and having a kind of wise-ass sense of humor. There was this old broken down cannon on the lawn, and I asked the civilian guy who was running it, I said, "Nice cannon, can I have it?" And the guy said yes. So I ended up going to the higher ups for the Corps of Engineers, writing my own little contract and borrowing this 3-inch field gun, it was a model 1902 3-inch field gun, borrowed a deuce and a half from some unit that I didn't even know the guys. They loaned it to me without knowing me. drove up to Dexter, Maine, brought it home to my house, and kept it there for about 2.5 years. And just I was a bachelor, I had my fun restoring it, and eventually it went on display in front of the 187th Brigade headquarters on Devens. So that was the interesting thing. After 5 years with that unit, they finally figured out that I was wearing armor brass, not Corps of Engineer brass, and the higher-ups down at Fort Meade decided that either I get branch transferred or leave the unit. Well, getting branch transferred wasn't convenient for me, so I left and ended up finishing out my 20 as an individual mobilization augmentee. Once a year I'd go to a 2-week camp as a human factors engineer and do some correspondence courses, and that got me through as retiring out as a major after 20 years, and so that was my whole thing. But the thing I should say is during all the time I came out here for ROTC and then as a reservist, I always kind of just dropped in to do what I was going to do, and I never looked around. I was never in the housing areas. I went to the PX maybe 3 times during that entire time, and then it was only years later I joined the Fort Devens Museum and actually explored the post and found out what it was about. But I had, when I was working for that Corps of Engineer unit, at my lunch times I had access to the drawing vault, so there were things that I saved from that time period that ended up in the museum years before I joined it myself. So that's about it for me. Thank you.